I love how career is typically a nonlinear pathway, and you just never know how one conversation with an alum or a professional out in the field can expose you to a position or a type of work that you hadn't considered before. And through that conversation, you realize, wow, this sounds really cool. Like, I could definitely see this aligning with my values, my interests, personality, and skill set.
Our guest is Kelly Rownd. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Marcy. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for coming. You are currently the Director of Career Readiness at the North Carolina State University Graduate School. That is a big job getting all the grad students ready.
Indeed, it is very rewarding. I love being able to just see the amazing work that our graduate students are doing here at NC State, but then how they begin to start envisioning what that next step is going to be for them and being able to cheer them on, champion them, help build connections to figure out that next step has just been so rewarding. And so I'm grateful to work with our graduate students here.
Well, we're happy to have you and grateful that you are able to share your words of wisdom and teach them all of the professional development things. How about yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Absolutely. So my career journey began at LSU. I got my bachelor's degree in sport administration, and at that time was really passionate about the sports industry and was curious where that could lead to in terms of career paths. Through experiential learning, such as internships and talking to people in the field, I really recognized that I was passionate about one-on-one coaching and being able to support student athletes. So that's really where my passion for career services began. And from there, I went to the University of Missouri, got my graduate degree in student affairs, and continued in that student athlete development realm and continued to get experience in career services. And as I was envisioning what my next step was going to be after graduate school, I was exploring options in career services, student athlete development, but it was actually through an unexpected conversation with a colleague of mine from undergrad where he was talking about his role as an admissions counselor for LSU. And so that really opened my eyes to a slightly different career path, but I feel like that role was just the perfect next step for me in my career. And it was so rewarding being able to support high school students and their families through the college admissions process, and especially for my alma mater at LSU. But after 2 years had passed, I realized I just continued to love those career conversations and having discussions around major and what that could look like at the university. And so that truly allowed me to transition into career services work, where I served in the LSU Oland Career Center for 5 years, helping undergraduate students, graduate students, and alumni with their various career journeys and across all different majors and disciplines. And then from there, wanted to stay in career services and was looking at opportunities, heard about this position at NC State, and was especially excited to work specifically with graduate students and with the Accelerate to Industry program. That's a career readiness program here at NC State that started to support our graduate students that are looking to explore and prepare for non-academic careers. I just really believed in the mission of this program and the opportunity to connect our graduate students that are looking to transition out of academia in various fields and be able to partner with industry professionals and alumni and people out in the field to really see how a graduate level degree can be transferred into a lot of different settings and spaces. Was very excited about this opportunity, and I've now been in this position for almost 2 years. And really the core of my job is helping our graduate students explore and prepare for their next step.
And their next step can be a bit intimidating because many of these grad students have not been in the professional world. So there's a lot of learning curve ahead for them about what do I want to be when I grow up? They've gotten that question so often. And how do I get there? So you mentioned this program, Accelerate to Industry. Is it A2I?
It is.
Okay, that's a little acronym if anyone wants to type that in their search bar, and we will link to that in our show notes. Share a little bit about why that can help a student who might be uncertain about their direction, and also even the ones that are clear on their direction to get the tools they need to reach their goals.
Absolutely. I think just the term career can hold a lot of emotion behind that word. I think especially for graduate students that have indicated a specialized program and field that they want to pursue, even though it provides a little bit more of a narrow path, there still is that unknown of what's that next step after graduation and how can I leverage this graduate degree for the workforce. And for a lot of our graduate students, they may have only been in these academia types of spaces. And so their network and just awareness of what's out there in terms of industry work, government work, and nonprofit work, it might just be unknown or limited. And so I think with this A2I program, it provides such a unique opportunity for our grad students to be curious and to really explore. I love how career is typically a nonlinear pathway, and you just never know how one conversation with an alum or a professional out in the field can expose you to a position or a type of work that you hadn't considered before. And through that conversation, you realize, wow, this sounds really cool. Like, I could definitely see this aligning with my values, my interests, personality, and skill set. And so I think with the A2I program, we have 6 different modules in which graduate students can connect to this type of content. In order to participate with A2I, it's open to all of our graduate students, and you don't even have to be set in certain career goals or know for sure that you want to step into a non-academic role. I think it's a great way to explore that because there are a lot of differences between academia and non-academic career paths. So what I love with this program is it really connects to a lot of alumni and professionals out in the field to provide insight into what are those different job titles and different types of positions that a graduate student can have from the STEM side and the non-STEM side. And then these individuals can also provide guidance and insight into what was it like to make that transition from academia into these various career paths. And I love just working with alumni and professionals out in the field because they're usually so willing to provide encouragement and advice to our graduate students of lessons that they wish they would have known as a grad student, that they're now excited to share that story with them. And so it's a fantastic program just to provide exposure, but then also really build meaningful connections. We have some modules in particular where a student can do a company site visit and actually go into spaces and see what is a day in the life like here at this organization. And we have our signature program known as Immersion Week, which represents or replicates a conference style type of event. And that's a fantastic way where our graduate students can have some really intentional and in-depth conversations around career readiness and what that looks like in industry spaces and government and nonprofit. And just once again, continue to hear from various people's career stories and journeys and how a graduate degree is so unique and can be uniquely leveraged for various career paths.
Sounds like a no-brainer to me that you would take advantage of this. However, we know what we hear from students is, oh, 6 sessions and I'm so busy. How would you convince someone to take advantage of this? Because when they graduate, they'll probably have to pay big bucks for things like this, and they may not realize how good they've got it now because they're already paying for it in their fees.
Absolutely. So with the A2I program and my work, I'm part of a bigger team called the Professional Development Team. My teammates, we oversee areas such as communication skills training and leadership development and also teaching support. We are focused on professional development, whether that is now as a graduate student at NC State, but also preparing our students to be professionals out in the field, whatever that career path looks like. And so I think with all of our programming, we just encourage our students to get involved as soon as possible because it's going to serve them well now, whether that is in their assistantships or if they are participating in internships or other opportunities around career readiness. It's going to benefit the work that they get to do now, but then also as they prepare for that next step. And so we as a professional development team have been intentional in trying to provide multiple modalities for our grad students. So whether that is in-person workshops or virtual offerings or micro-learning modules, there's tons of ways to get connected to this content because we know a graduate student schedule is very challenging. There's a lot of demands and a lot of things that are going on personally and professionally. And so we want to be very aware of that and make this content as accessible and on demand as possible. There are different, kind of phases throughout the graduate student life cycle and key pieces that might be more suited depending upon the career questions that they have or just the nature of their graduate degree. But I think just getting involved with this content as soon as possible is just imperative to be able to expand that network and to just be really curious into career paths. I think just taking small steps forward and being proactive in this process is just going to sort of just prepare for that next unknown step as easily as possible.
Well, listeners, if you're a procrastinator, you heard it here first. Do not delay. The earlier, the better with this kind of content that's being developed in so many different formats. Well, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of what you're teaching people. In this job market right now, there's quite a bit of anxiety. How do you make yourself stand out? What do you say to students that come in with that big question?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first, just from a career coaching standpoint, I like to listen and empathize that, this is a challenging time to search for jobs and there is a lot of uncertainty depending upon the career path and industry that the student is looking into. And so just being able to listen and hear what has worked well, but then what are some of those pain points or some of those challenges, and let's come up with a proactive strategy on how to take steps forward and be able to control the pieces that we can control. Typically, I will talk to the student and we have conversations around their networking and have they been able to have conversations with professionals out in the field. And depending upon what that looks like, I feel like I'm always encouraging individuals to set up informational interviews. That is just such a great way for our grad students to learn about various career paths and to also get some helpful job search strategies and tips from alums that maybe recently went through the job search process or maybe are a little further along in their career. It's just a great way for them to continue to identify the types of roles that they want to apply to through these informational interviews. And then also through those conversations, you just never know how you might learn about an opportunity. I'm a perfect example of that. It was through an informational interview that I learned about my current role here at NC State. And so that was just an unexpected piece, but just a perfect example of as you begin to build and leverage your career community, you just never know what opportunities are out there. And I think having those conversations is a great starting point. So that's something that our students can do to set themselves apart. And then I think being intentional and telling their career story. I think with graduate students, it can be challenging in communicating technical research and experiences, especially to a broad audience or those that don't share the same technical background. And so that is always a key piece of information that we discuss in our sessions as well, of whether you're in a formal job search process and need to clearly communicate your graduate level work in your resume or in your cover letter, or maybe in an interview setting, you have to be able to connect and effectively tell that story, regardless of who is in the room. So that's a key piece that I think will really help candidates stand apart from others is those communication skills. I think that's imperative for every type of work and field. And then effectively tailoring application materials as well is such a key piece in that job search to really connect the great work that they're doing here at NC State or even previously to this next part of their story in applying to this job.
Very thorough answer. And there's so much in that. You talked about informational interviews, which I know right now with the desire to have immediate gratification, that's hard because it's not as though you're applying for an opening, an advertised vacancy. You are just talking to someone and there's no vacancy there. But to remind them that those relationships can turn into things. And you said you're a great example of that. Is there a success story that you can think of since you've been here almost 2 years now of maybe a student that you've worked with that could have been a little intimidated or anxious about the process and what the outcome was?
Yeah, there is one student that comes to mind. There was just a lot of hesitancy of networking, just feeling like that wasn't a skill set that came naturally to her. And so through one-on-one coaching and having conversations, we were able to make it an easier process for her. And just thinking through, okay, what kinds of questions are you interested in? Like, what are you curious about? And so we were able to effectively sort of put together a roadmap of, okay, let's identify some alumni or some professionals that we can connect with. So we looked through the alumni feature on LinkedIn, and then we were able to find tangible people for her to reach out to. Then we talked through how can we send an effective message, because reaching out to people we don't know on LinkedIn can also feel intimidating. And so walking through those steps of crafting a compelling message was important. And then as she started hearing back from those alums of their willingness to talk to her, then we were able to really sit down and think about, okay, what will be some good questions that you can ask? And so I think by having those key pieces and that step by step for her and just normalizing the process just helped tremendously, so that when she was able to have the conversation, she felt so much more confident because she had done the prep work of already identifying her questions ahead of time. I think for individuals that maybe haven't had a candid career conversation or maybe haven't entered into an informational interview before, it does feel nerve-wracking of knowing, what do I ask them, or feeling like they have to come up with those questions on the spot, when in reality you can prep and have those questions ready to go. And so I think just pulling back those layers and walking through those pieces really gave her success in just feeling confident with that process and actually enjoying it, and realizing that networking doesn't have to be scary, and it really is just an opportunity to connect with people. And she has just as much to offer in those conversations as she's gaining from the professional in the field. I think our graduate students can easily forget that as students, they're still doing amazing work and things that our alumni and professionals want to hear about. And so they have just as much to offer and give in those conversations as do the alums.
That was a wonderful way to walk through it all. You kind of went through that whole roadmap, and then the confidence was the success at the end. And believing that even reverse mentoring is possible, because as the new person, the less experienced person, you can share things with people, and people love to give advice, right? I mean, it's great to be asked, how did you get here? It makes people just kind of puff out their chest and be ready to give you the rules of the road compared to how they got there. All right, so I want to get into a couple of nitty-gritty things. Let's talk about that resume. You mentioned it earlier. That can be a problem for some students when they're seeing that applicant tracking systems may be out there and blocking them, and they're just saying, I'm not hearing anything back. I'm getting ghosted. How do you help them when they're trying to, you mentioned tailor the resume, but get a little more into what that means?
Yeah, there's so many unknown factors in submitting applications and wondering and knowing whether or not a company is utilizing AI software. But typically, some feedback that I'll give with AI software, it has a hard time reading a resume if there are graphics and different design elements. And so I always encourage our students, even though it can feel a little tedious on the front end, to build their content from a blank Word document. I think that's going to serve them better in the long run, and they'll be able to really maximize that page space. And so that's a key piece. Also, I think ultimately the document should be clear, concise, and consistent. Employers want to easily be able to understand the experiences and what the student is trying to articulate. And then with the resume in particular, as I'm thinking about it through the lens of a graduate student and those bullet point statements, I think it's so important to talk about not only what you did, but what is the outcome and the reason. And that just, I think, continues to be a challenging part from the student side in articulating that on the resume, but it's also the piece that industry partners have shared. That's what really matters to them, especially out in industry. They want to know, what is the outcome, the result, the impact that our students are able to make, and the transferable skills. And so that would be my best advice for those that are building their resumes and continuing to refine them. Make sure you're incorporating that impact and that outcome, and to avoid technical jargon as best as you can, because once again, you're going to have multiple readers looking at your resume. Typically, the first set of eyes would be from the talent acquisition space, and they may not have the same technical experience and background. So they have to be able to recognize that your skills and experiences do correlate with the job that you're applying to. And then also, it has to connect as it moves through the process with the hiring managers and the others that probably do share your technical experience. Essentially, you're making your science or your experience just more approachable. You're making it an opportunity for a broad audience to really connect to it. So I think those are some really key pieces that can set our graduate students apart as they move forward with the job search process, specifically with their resume.
Good to know about the ATS blocking columns and some really simple things that people can do to make sure that they don't get bounced out. Now let's hope they get the interview. Some students are talking about using AI to prepare for interviews. Do you recommend that? And what's your best nugget on getting ready to wow someone in the face-to-face?
I think AI can be a great tool in terms of interview preparation. I have found it to be really effective for our students if they will put the job posting into AI software and have it craft interview prep questions. I think that's a really fantastic way to become familiarized with just different types of questions and with it being curated based on the job posting, because the employer's already outlined exactly what they're looking for in that job posting, and so they want to ask questions that also connects back to that content that they put in that posting itself. So that's a really great starting point of familiarizing themselves with different types of questions. But I also recommend that our students walk through that job posting themselves and start thinking of specific examples and scenarios in which they were faced with different situations or have demonstrated those certain skills that employers are looking for. And so that's a really great way to just become familiarized with lots of different types of questions. And then for those behavioral-based questions, I do encourage our students to also start thinking through the 4 pieces that they should respond with. And with a behavioral-based question, you should utilize the STAR method. So the situation, task, action, and result. And those 4 pieces really should be outlined in those behavioral-based questions so that an employer can understand how you reacted in the past, and that's typically an indicator of how you would respond going forward in the future. So I think that can be just a successful strategy in preparing questions ahead of time, but then actually thinking and reflecting and working through some of those behavioral-based questions ahead of time.
And practice-wise, does your office offer any kind of help with that, virtual or in-person mock interviews?
We do. So with the A2I program, we have a job search strategies module. And so we actually walk through the 4 phases of a job search strategy in how to set a strategy, tailoring the application materials, interview prep, and then managing the job offer. And so these are cohort-based programs. I offer it once in the fall and once in the spring. And we talk through all of those different pieces. And so with the interview prep, we talk about scenarios. I'll bring in talent acquisition professionals to hear from their perspective of kind of the do's and don'ts as it relates not only to application and tailoring materials, but from the interviewer side as well. And so that's a really great way to hear real-time information from those in the field that are on the hiring side. Also, with the A2I program and with Immersion Week in particular, that's a great way for students to get feedback on their resume and also some mock interview questions. So there are those elements to practice and prepare in group settings and hear from industry professionals. And I also do offer one-on-one career coaching appointments. And so that's a great way for a student and I to sit down and practice through some questions. We can do generalized mock interview prep, or if they have a specific interview coming up, I can even tailor some questions based on the field and the type of role they're interested in.
Goodness, that is wonderful. Those resources, I cannot believe how fortunate we are to have you offering all this and being able to do this personalized help with students. Fantastic. All right, time machine time. So we're now going to hop in our time machine. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, we're going to the year 2035. So 1 decade from now, what does Kelly Rownd of today need to hear from her future self?
That is a great question. I think as I envision looking forward and what I really value right now and what I have seen to be true throughout my professional career, it's the relationships that really matter and the people you're able to meet and the connections you're able to build. And so regardless of what my job and role looks like in 10 years or where I'm at, I hope to be surrounded continuously, like I have been, just around great colleagues and professionals and friends. I have found that to be the most meaningful part of my work, is being able to build those relationships and to collaborate. I love being able to work alongside our fantastic faculty and staff that also are like-minded in supporting our students. And I think, as I, give my future self some advice, would be to always lean on that community to continue to build those relationships and find ways to just foster that.